The air shimmered with an almost imperceptible distortion, like heat waves dancing on pavement, as the press conference in Mumbai's Kala Academy reached its climax. Reporters craning their necks, cameras flashing in a staccato rhythm, and Aishwarya Rai, poised in a deep indigo sari laced with what now appeared to be alien embroidery, stood silently at the podium with an unreadable expression, until the world quite literally changed. It began with a strange pulsation in the sky, a wave of iridescent light that washed over the horizon, stopping traffic, silencing birds, and leaving a collective shiver in the crowd. Gasps filled the room as her eyes momentarily turned a shade of ultraviolet unseen by the human spectrum, and the microphone short-circuited with a crackle of otherworldly interference. Behind her, an ornate silver disc etched with galactic symbols descended silently, hovering inches above the ground, casting reflections that bent the laws of light. A hush fell, an ancient kind of awe settling into every corner of the room as Aishwarya finally spoke, not with her voice, but with a kind of harmonic resonance that vibrated in their very bones. "I am not who you think I am," she said, and the crowd, skeptics, fans, journalists, aides, froze, their reality fracturing beneath the weight of her revelation. Among them was Meera Kapoor, a junior cultural correspondent whose usual job involved mundane celebrity coverage, but who now found herself rooted in place, mouth slightly agape, torn between instinctive skepticism and an unexplainable sense of recognition, like she'd heard this truth whispered to her in dreams long forgotten. Her heart pounded, palms sweaty, camera forgotten in her lap, as conflicting emotions spiraled: fear, disbelief, and a strange flicker of exhilaration. Meera's mentor, Rajan Dasgupta, an aging journalist with a long-standing theory about extraterrestrial royalty hidden in Indian mythology, gripped her shoulder with a trembling hand and muttered, "I knew it. I knew it." The crowd was a mosaic of reactions, some backing away in disbelief, others filming furiously, and a few kneeling, overwhelmed by a presence they suddenly perceived as divine. Aishwarya, no, Empress Aishwarya of the Trinari Empire, lifted her hand and the hovering ship expanded into an orb of light that filled the entire space, projecting images of distant planets, lost civilizations, and ancient wars that seemed to echo through time itself. The atmosphere was dense, not chaotic but heavy with something beyond comprehension, as if Earth had unknowingly crossed a threshold into a much larger universe. While Aishwarya remained composed, regal even in the storm of revelations, Meera felt the world she knew collapse and reform around her, her rational mind resisting, her gut telling her to trust. The Empress had hidden for centuries, walking among mortals, waiting for the right convergence of time, power, and galactic need. Why reveal herself now? What had changed? As questions swirled like storm clouds, Aishwarya's gaze fell directly on Meera, lingering with unsettling intensity, as if she recognized something within her no one else could see. It was the beginning of something massive, ancient, and new all at once, and as the orb's light faded slightly and Aishwarya signaled the crowd to rise, the mysteries only deepened, leaving Earth's fate, and Meera's, in the trembling balance between truth and the stars. The world felt as though it was teetering on the edge of a precipice as the shock of Aishwarya's revelations slowly began to settle, and for Meera, the truth, this unimaginable, vast truth, threatened to consume her. She had always been a journalist driven by facts, by stories that could be researched, dissected, and explained, but this was beyond her understanding, beyond anything her rational mind could accept. Yet there was a pull she couldn't explain, a tug deep inside her that urged her to move forward, to seek the truth that had now unfolded before her, no matter the cost. With Rajan at her side, his old eyes alight with fervor, she began to dig deeper, researching ancient texts, speaking to those few who had known the legends of galactic empires, the mythic stories hidden in plain sight, and listening to every fragmented detail Aishwarya shared in her rare moments of transparency. But as they moved closer to understanding the magnitude of Aishwarya's true identity and her mission on Earth, they faced increasingly strange and troubling obstacles. Whispers of shadowy figures lurking at the edges of their investigations, unmarked vehicles following them in the night, and cryptic warnings that left them questioning their every step. Meera found herself grappling with her own growing sense of unease. Was Aishwarya's claim true, or was she manipulating them all? The more they discovered, the less certain they were of their place in this galactic drama. Rajan, whose belief in the truth of Aishwarya's words had kept him relentlessly moving forward, now began to show signs of doubt, suggesting they tread carefully, as if something darker was at play beneath the surface. As their investigations led them through underground archives and secret networks, they encountered others, secret societies, factions from across the globe, and even rogue scientists who had been working on understanding Aishwarya's origins for years, all of them eager to claim a piece of the Empress's knowledge or to control her power for themselves. Mira, once so sure of herself, found herself questioning everything, struggling between the allure of truth and the gnawing fear of what it might cost. She could feel the weight of the decision growing heavier by the day. Would she align herself with Aishwarya, whose motives were still largely unknown, or would she continue to search for a way to uncover the forces that had shaped her, forces that were not of this world? As Aishwarya's influence began to stretch further, her ethereal presence appearing in flashes of light across the world, her power subtly weaving through global leaders, Mira felt the rising pressure, torn between the intense gravitational pull of curiosity and the mounting dread of what might lie ahead. And then, in a quiet moment of reflection, the biggest revelation yet came. Aishwarya, the Galactic Empress, was not merely hiding on Earth, but had been orchestrating humanity's evolution from the shadows, shaping history, guiding the progress of civilization, her entire existence a well-calculated plan to prepare Earth for an impending galactic war. The emotional stakes surged as Mira realized that they weren't just uncovering a hidden truth, they were potentially witnessing the end of one era and the beginning of another. The answers they sought had become riddled with dangers far beyond their grasp, and now they were faced with an impossible choice: to trust Aishwarya and risk everything, or to expose her and face the unknown consequences of disrupting an ancient galactic order. Each step was a step further into a maze of mysteries, where every ally they found seemed to have their own hidden agendas, and every piece of knowledge they uncovered only led to more questions, as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling before them. The deeper they delved, the more Mira found herself wrestling with an emotional conflict she hadn't anticipated: loyalty to the truth, to her own beliefs, and an undeniable bond she felt with Aishwarya, who, in moments of vulnerability, revealed the loneliness that had come from living among mortals for centuries, unable to fully connect. But Mira's connection with the Empress was becoming more than just intellectual curiosity. It was emotional too, and as the final, defining choice loomed ever closer, the weight of what she might lose, and what she might gain, pressed heavily on her heart, the tension building to a fever pitch. As Mira, Rajan, and the others prepared for the final confrontation, the weight of everything they had uncovered pressed down on them like a suffocating cloud. They knew the stakes were higher than ever before. The choice they were about to make could shape not only the future of Earth, but the fate of the entire galaxy. Aishwarya, the Galactic Empress, had revealed herself to be far more than they had ever anticipated. Her true power, her ancient motives, and the knowledge she held about the impending galactic war that threatened to engulf every living being on Earth and beyond. The enemy, it seemed, was not just an external force, but something much more insidious: the very system of control Aishwarya had created over centuries, one that relied on manipulation, secrecy, and the gathering of power in the shadows. It was her own empire, a network of intergalactic factions and deep-seated alliances, that had begun to crumble, with enemies emerging from within her ranks, seeking to take over and seize her throne. They were the true antagonists, not just in the galaxy, but on Earth too, hidden in plain sight and now emerging from the darkness to challenge Aishwarya's reign. Mira found herself at the center of it all, torn between the bond she had forged with Aishwarya and the undeniable truth that the Empress was not a flawless leader, but one who had made choices that had caused harm in her pursuit of an unimaginable power. With the confrontation looming, Mira and Rajan spent sleepless nights gathering allies from the underground, rogue scientists who had once studied Aishwarya's history, and even defectors from the Empress's own faction, all while the tension in the air grew thicker. Their resources were thin, both physical and emotional. Mira's trust in Aishwarya had frayed. Rajan, too, questioned the cost of following the Empress any longer. But despite these doubts, they knew the truth: if they didn't act, a far more dangerous power would take control of Earth, and the future of humanity would be sealed in darkness. They couldn't afford to hesitate, as they gathered their remaining strength, both internally. And in terms of alliances, Mira made a choice. She had to confront Aishwarya directly. She needed to know whether the Empress could be trusted, whether the vision Aishwarya had shared for Earth was truly the one they needed to follow. Rajan, older and wearier, was less certain, but he knew their options were dwindling. They had a plan, though it was filled with risks. They would infiltrate Aishwarya's command center, a place of unimaginable power hidden beneath layers of defense, using the very knowledge they had pieced together over the course of their investigation. They would confront Aishwarya's closest allies, challenge the faction within her empire that sought to exploit her, and discover the final piece of the puzzle, the one hidden truth that could either save them or destroy everything. With every breath, every heartbeat, the tension surged, and yet, amidst the nervous energy, there was a strange calm in the realization that they were about to face the greatest challenge of their lives. It was a moment of reflection before the chaos, a quiet acknowledgement that nothing would be the same after this. The emotional and psychological toll had already been immense, and now, with no turning back, they had to rely on everything they had learned, everything they had sacrificed, and the hope that their choices would be the right ones. But in that instant, Mira understood something vital, that sometimes, in order to protect what you love, you must be willing to confront the darkness, no matter how overwhelming. The final showdown was inevitable, and every decision they made now would either lead to salvation or collapse. The storm was coming, and all they could do was face it head-on, together. The moment of truth had arrived, and as Mira, Rajan, and their unlikely allies stood at the threshold of Aishwarya's command center, a deep, suffocating silence enveloped them, an eerie stillness that foreshadowed the storm they were about to unleash. Inside the massive, otherworldly structure, the power emanated like an invisible pulse, overwhelming and all-encompassing as Aishwarya, the once revered Empress, stood before them, her figure illuminated by swirling galactic symbols, her regal composure hiding the conflict within. The final confrontation was not one of swords or guns, but of wills, of ideals, and of emotional reckoning. Mira stepped forward, heart pounding, knowing that what she was about to say would either shatter or heal everything. "You've been hiding the truth from us all along, Aishwarya. This isn't about saving Earth. It's about control." Aishwarya's eyes flashed, not with anger, but with a deep, centuries-old sorrow, and in that moment, it was clear that the Empress was just as torn, her entire existence leading up to this defining clash. The stakes had never been higher. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, but so did the very soul of the galaxy. Would it remain under the tyrannical influence of Aishwarya's empire, or could a new order be forged, one based on transparency and mutual respect, not fear and domination? As the confrontation escalated, each character was forced to make a sacrifice. Rajan, his body aging and his spirit worn, took a step back, realizing that his time to lead had passed. He passed the torch to Mira, urging her to rise above the conflict, to be the voice of reason in a world gone mad. Mira, though still conflicted, understood the truth. The path forward would require an unimaginable sacrifice, and as the final battle unfolded, a battle of words, of ideals, and of power, she was forced to decide whether she would stop Aishwarya or stand with her, accepting the burden of everything that would come after. The defining moment came when Mira, in a moment of clarity, stepped between Aishwarya and her enemies, choosing to trust the Empress, not because she fully believed in her vision, but because she believed in the possibility of change, of healing what had been broken. The galaxy trembled, the power of the Empress faltered, and for the first time in centuries, she let go of the empire that had been her sole purpose, allowing it to crumble in the face of a new era. The tides shifted. Aishwarya, no longer a ruthless ruler, chose to remain on Earth, not as a conqueror, but as a guide, a protector of its future, while the factions that had opposed her dissipated into nothingness. The final, lingering question was whether humanity could truly rebuild from the ashes of such a monumental shift, but Mira, forever changed by her choices, knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The journey had taught her that the fight for freedom and justice was never black and white. It was fraught with complexities, with moments of doubt and moments of clarity, and that sometimes, in order to protect what you love, You had to make the hardest decision of all. The world would change, but it would change on their terms, not the terms of a galactic empire. As they stood in the quiet aftermath, Mira and Rajan knew they had played their part, but the legacy they would leave behind was one that would transcend even their understanding. They had fought not just for Earth, but for a vision of what it could be, a world where power no longer ruled in secret, where truth was the foundation of society. And as the final rays of light touched the horizon, they walked forward, together, knowing that the true journey had only just begun. Subscribe to find out what happens next.